All right. So, what should we look at first? What was the conversation point?
Let's just work our way down.
All right. So, further the following purposes, that looks lifted from the state law, right?
Yeah, those are the 8 things that are in the state law.
Can you guys talk about adding or going beyond the purposes here?
No, we do it. She did it below.
Really? All right.
So now you have all these special ones. So this is within. So she broke it into within coastal areas here.
Within inland areas, nice.
Yep.
So one thing that I was wondering about, do you think we should break up coastal areas into Plum Island versus Salt Marsh? Like, Plum Island is very different than, the Parker River, for instance.
Well, I think that within coastal areas means both.
Right. Do you think there's any point in being more specific than that, or not really?
There's a whole section below where she lifted the old bylaw stuff on Plum Island. So I think it works. I understand your question, but having read everything, I think it works. So you're going too far while you ask me things, though.
I mean, it's just where you put them. Sometimes they go on the top, sometimes they go at the bottom.
Right.
Regulated activities. This is the stuff lifted from the existing bylaw that, right? Is this the stuff that's specific to Plum Island?
Go back up to the top already. Let's work our way down in a logical fashion. There's only one place you have to skip down. Or no. The regulated activities, that's a mix of, I think, things from neighboring town stuff. Most of it may be from Ipswich. She had a comment in there, I thought. It's in Newburyport and Ipswich, and I think Raleigh too. This language.
This one, I'm on 95-2.1 3H.
Yeah.
This one I'm curious about. If that one, if we're overshooting a little bit.
Yeah, it's in other towns. But I mean, that's been, I mean, it's not incongruent with, no cut zones or, I mean, that's all stuff we've done before, especially in the riverfront area.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, backyard maintenance, if you read that too closely.
Yeah, so I think that there's exemptions for that, or we can put in exemptions for that. There's some towns that do have like explicit, anything less than 6-inch DBH, backyard maintenance type stuff is exempt.
All right. And so you guys obviously went with somebody else's model and then you incorporated what you felt was good. So the idea of how we bring this to town meeting and the select board, we're not going to be editing the existing law.
No, this is the town bylaw that we brought in this is the town bylaw in Word format and we brought in language from other towns.
Wow, it's so much cleaner.
Yeah.
It really doesn't look like the native bylaw was updated. It looks like a whole new one was written.
That's what she told me she was going to do. She may have reformatted a little bit, but yeah, that's all the
Plum Island. Of this? Was this all Mary?
Mary did 95% of this.
This is lovely. This is formatted, easy to read, clear.
I mean, that's all existing. That's all the Plum Island stuff. But yeah, the formatting is great.
Do you think we've had a lot of conversations about FEMA zones? Do you think we should cross that bridge a little bit? Talk about how we.
I think my understanding of it, and we may want to get clarification of this, is that the language regarding the Plum Island bylaw was legally imposed as part of a settlement.
Well, would the settlement allow us to get stricter, just say, or we just don't touch it regardless?
Dan would probably be the one who would know the answer to that.
Okay.
But I haven't felt that. I mean, I guess it's a question of whether we feel things are broken right now. I've never.
No, I don't think.
I haven't felt like our bylaw is broken. I felt like the FEMA zone stuff gets wonky.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we want to dance around with the bylaw to try and fix their problems when they could just end up making a change that then would screw up our bylaw.
Good point. That's a good point. Because the FEMA zones are their own problem. And, if
Gretchen's coming back.
Yeah, that's strange. She missed us. Yeah, just because FEMA zones aren't exactly staying up to date, shall we say?
Yeah. So maybe if we go back up, we're talking about different purposes of the wetlands bylaw. I did have one that Ipswich and Newburyport, Mary didn't put in, but I liked, and I think you're gonna like. You go back up to page 1 and go to the 95-1-1B. Yeah.
Prevent storm damage?
No, no, if you go into the within inland areas, I suggested that Ipswich and Newburyport had erosion and sedimentation control as a special purpose, which I really like.
Protect all the purposes in additional fund purposes. Oh. This is very interesting.
I think that like the within coastal areas doesn't need it because all the special stuff on Plum Island is already doing that. But I think I really like the idea of erosion and sedimentation control as a purpose. I mean, so much of what our orders are already about that. It's about distance. It's about putting in structures both during construction and making sure things are designed after construction to control erosion. Like when you think about the one on the big house on Orchard that went down to the marsh, like that was the big sticking point, designing that path down to the marsh, down the hill, so that it wasn't going to cause a lot of erosion and sedimentation into the marsh.
Yeah, I take your point, but I don't know if I would want that as a purpose because erosion is more like a symptom, of the problem rather than the problem itself. It's, we're protecting the resource from, a denuded landscape that erodes easier,
Right. Yes, correct. But saying, I think you need to have the symptom as your purpose so that you can address the malady.
Well, let's just say, what if we said something more broad to the effect of to protect wetlands from, smothering, or something like that. And then erosion is just part of that, as is arguably something else that we never would have thought of, or if we like.
I'm not a wetland scientist, but I do a lot of river science, and I'm around a lot of river science and water body science, and I've never seen any discussion of smothering in my life. Like I understand your point, But I think erosion and sedimentation are two recognized issues that everybody knows about and can wrap their head around and address. And there's best management practices.
All right, so then let's use a different word. Instead of erosion, could we say bank? Because bank has a meaning within the, if we say bank and buffer and toe of slope and all of the other terminology, and we just repeat it again and use the word stability rather than erosion, to protect and promote stability of, bank, slope, toe.
I think you just made it more specific when you said you wanted to make it more general.
Well, I think I think it's using specific examples to make it more general, because if we're protecting the stability of the regulated resources, erosion is part of stability, but there's more to it than that, arguably.
Why don't you put a reply in there and say,
I'll figure out if I'm just making things more complicated, or if I'm actually splicing and slicing and dicing hairs that matter.
Yeah, why don't you put a note in there about that?
Let's see. This, I think, should also go up here for salt marsh. What did I just do?
I don't know what you just did. I don't know what you're trying to do.
I'm trying to copy paste this line.
I don't know what that means, Brian.
So wetlands are ridiculous carbon sinks. And carbon markets, while not a valuable thing, are a real thing. And this is arguably getting ahead of things by saying that the town of Newbury has all of this wetland that is a massive carbon sink, and that has a climate resiliency resource, and protecting the opportunity for carbon resiliency or climate resiliency through a carbon sink, is another good reason not to destroy or impair wetlands.
Okay, I agree with you. What would you do as a regulation or a condition that would have anything to do with that? And when have you So I think you want me to get all 2020 and young person on you?
Hold on a second. Let me take one more step in this direction, then you can get all 2020 on me.
Yeah.
The climate resiliency stuff that's coming out of EEA, right, is growing and changing and evolving. Climate resiliency just keeps getting more common, complex, and fundamental, if you will. And this is a finger-crossing, hopeful incorporation to say that the wetland bylaw, all the stuff after this, in addition to all of the reasons, this is a reason we're protecting the wetlands. It's one more reason. It doesn't actually play into the regulatory aspect of this. It's just one more reason to keep an eye on and protect and preserve wetland.
Yeah. So I agree with everything you're saying. I just don't see us ever doing anything with it, where no. I think everything else links to potential regulations.
Yeah, so your point being, if it's not something that has a regulatory downstream, why put it at all?
Yes.
It's a good question. I don't have an answer, good or bad. I just didn't think of it quite in that way, but
I think especially, I think there's places that we could just do it and it'd be great. I think that given our situation, we may not want to put cherries that don't matter on top of the icing. Or that we don't have a use for. They matter. I said that wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll think on that. That's a good idea. It's a good observation. So you just, looking at what Mary did and what you've done, oh, here we go.
Well, yeah, I added a few things. But you also missed, I added riverfront area as defined by the Riverfront Act, as most recently amended to the 95.2.
Okay.
Right now, our riverfront area regulations, if I'm correct, are running through zoning. They're zoning regs rather than Conservation Commission regs.
Interesting.
Yes. And there's been pressure on the zoning board to rescind them. And I'd rather just get them where they belong with the Conservation Commission and tie them up to the Wetlands Protection Act and kind of have it with the rest of these resources anyways.
That's a good point. Right. Where's your next comment here?
I have 3 comments within 95.2. Or 95-2, sorry. Which is on the first page.
Right. Ipswich has been within 150 feet.
Yep.
And then covering the buffer zone.
I'm not quite sure how, I think that she goes, so yeah, I think I figured this out. So she says isolated vegetated wetlands and then provides a definition further below that basically means any inland wetland. Like Ipswich calls them freshwater wetlands. She called them an isolated vegetated wetland, which kind of like threw me for a loop because I think of like vegetated wetland buffer. I think of isolated, what is it? What's the isolated? Oh, cry. Help me out here. Isolated land subject to flooding.
Yeah.
It gets me all that I don't care. I'm not going to argue about about word choice, but that's kind of gets me a little wonky. Yeah, and then they're 95-2.1.1. I don't know if that's redundant there. She calls out the buffer zone. These are probably questions for Mary. It's a buffer. She can be here. I hope she feels better.
No, the number 4, basically she's pulling in every wetland issue, and rather than addressing them individually, just bunching them together. Anything that doesn't get a buffer zone in the WPA, we are giving a buffer zone.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a clean way to do that.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I want to get back to that one I keep trying to get to. And then you have a comment there, redundant to eliminate.
I don't think it is, given what you just said. I think I was misunderstanding what was going on.
Yeah, because there's a buffer zone in state law, and then the buffer zone that we are.
So then you just go back up. There, the following definition, like that, this clears it up. 9 there, where she defines isolated vegetated wetland.
Wetland not bordering on a body of water and not exceeding 5,000 square feet.
Well, no, whether or not. So any wetland. So it includes any marsh, bog, swamp, or wet meadow.
Right. So so it's any marsh, whether or not it borders on a water body.
Yep.
And then the wetland may be defined by its community, a wetland not bordering on a body of water and not exceeding 5,000 square feet shall not be subject to protection under this bylaw unless it is or can be certified as a vernal pool. So she's giving the isolated wetlands of 5,000 square feet or less a regulatory pass, and the 5,000 square feet or more are looped in. So that becomes a question of, do we want to, scratch? No, I think this is good, because isolated wetlands are a new topic. They'd be a new regulatory space, and we can get our feet wet on the 5,000 square feet and over, and then come into these others later. Yeah. This is one of those things where I feel like if we just ask to regulate all isolated wetlands, that's biting off maybe more than we can or should chew.
I just had two additions from here on in. The 95, I didn't change all the numbering below it, but 95, the first 95-6.
Always. Yeah, I see your point, and I agree, because the way it's written.
I think on that one, she just forgot to delete barrier beach. Like that's a holder from no one. But this I found in another bylaw, and I thought that I don't know if that's going to be like a no-fly zone at town meeting or the select board. It could be, but I thought it was worth discussing.
The thing about this that's tricky is that these rights are granted by the state law, but they're not explicit anywhere. It's all polite, if you will. And if push comes to shove, we do have the ability to go, but it's just rude, essentially. And putting it on paper like this, I have heard horror stories about, people who it doesn't apply to, getting in the way, saying, shooting something down.
So you're saying it caused problems? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. Like bringing it up caused more problems than it solved.
Okay. And then I had a comment. I think that we want to wait for Bill Holt on. Is there any language you want to tweak here about review time? And then finally, I had the harebrained idea in 95-12C.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Okay.
It's into another law about ticketing and the way ticketing functions, because technically this would be a ticket. And because you're giving a ticket, it runs a certain way. You'd have to change the whole thing to make it work.
Gotcha. It's 6:30.
Yeah, buzz. This looks really lovely. Like, it's clean and easy reading. This is awesome.
Yeah, Barry did a great job.
Yes, you did. Way better than what I did. All right, I will see if there's anything else that I want to talk about, and I will send the comment to her. And if she, we'll have our side talk, and then we'll just schedule another one of these. Hopefully with the three of us.
Yeah.
But this is awesome. All right, cool, man. I'm gonna hit end.
All right, good to see you, buddy.